This is chapter 26. We're going to start with male reproductive, and then we're going to move into female reproductive. We're going to talk about the structure and function of the reproductive system and the advantages of sexual reproduction over asexual reproduction. The reproductive system's function is fairly straightforward. It's to produce, nurture, and transport ova and sperm, secrete hormones. The primary reproductive organs are the gonads. Okay, so in the males, those are the testes, and females, those are the ovaries. The male gamete is the motile gamete, that's the sperm, and the female gamete are the eggs. Okay, so remember that if you can produce eggs, you are a biological female. If you can produce sperm, you are a biological male. Okay. There are two types of reproductive systems. There is an asexual and asexual reproductive system in work on planet Earth. Okay, so let's just address that briefly, okay, because you'll run into it again if you take microbiology, and it's worth knowing about. Okay, so in asexual reproduction, you have in the human body mitosis, okay, that's what eukaryotes do. We are eukaryotes, we have a true nucleus. Okay. Okay. And then in bacteria, you have something called binary fission. Okay. And that's prokaryotic. Okay. Now, basically what happens when this occurs is that you make a clone of the original cell or organism, in the case of a single-celled organism. Okay. As a result, you have very low biodiversity. Okay. All right. Whereas in sexual reproduction, okay, you have meiosis, followed by fertilization. Okay. Meiosis produces haploid cells, and fertilization generates a diploid cell. Okay. So in sexual reproduction, you're a combination of the genetic contribution of the male and the female gamete. Okay. Okay. And that produces the diploid zygote. Zygote. That's a G there. Okay. And that has high biodiversity. Okay. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, you have recombination of genetic material in both egg and sperm prior to their production. Okay. And number two, at fertilization, you become a combination of genetic material from that recombined genetic material, which means that you have a greater possibility for different combinations of genes, and thus a greater possibility for biodiversity in the population. And why do we make a big deal about biodiversity? Because that provides something upon which the environment can act with selection pressure. Okay, and that's a big deal because that means that the species is more likely to survive an environmental challenge. Okay. In humans, Mitosis is used for repair and growth and maintenance, okay? And meiosis is used for the production of gametes, right? But in asexually reproducing organisms, such as in a bacteria, binary fission is used for everything, and in a asexually reproducing eukaryote, mitosis is used for everything, okay? The only biodiversity that comes in asexual reproduction comes from mutation, and mutation can be the result of mistakes in DNA replication, viruses or bacteriophage inserting their genetic material into the host, and interaction with things like radiation and mutagens in the environment, which either damage or bind DNA and damage and change its structure, right? And those changes can either be good or bad or neutral, right? A good change means the organism is more likely to live long enough to breed. A bad change means that that organism is less likely to live long enough to breed, and a neutral change has no effect, okay? And that's what drives evolution and natural selection, are those changes that provide an advantage accumulating to the point where you make a new species, okay? So in terms of evolution, we generally can't see that in real time, but we can certainly see natural selection, okay? And we see it every day. Okay? All right. Male reproductive system produces, nourishes, and transports sperm, deposits sperm within the female reproductive tract, and it secretes hormones. Okay? The structures are the testes, the genital ducts, the accessory glands, and the external genitalia. Okay? So let's learn a little bit about the male reproductive system.
The primary role of the male reproductive system is to produce and deliver sperm to fertilize an egg in the female. These sperm are produced outside of the body cavity by the testicles, which are located in the scrotum. The scrotum protects and supports the male reproductive organs that are located outside of the body cavity. These include the testicles, epididymis, and vas deferens. The testicles produce about 300 million sperm each day. However, this is possible only if the temperature of the testicle is 93.2 degrees Fahrenheit. The scrotum maintains this temperature by adjusting how closely it holds the testicles to the body. The interior of each testicle consists of multiple lobules, containing 2 or 3 seminiferous tubules. It is within these tubules that sperm formation begins. The sperm moves out of the tubules into the epididymis, and then into the vas deferens. The vas deferens carry the sperm upward into the body cavity. After the sperm leaves the vas deferens through the ejaculatory ducts, they pass the openings of the seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicles, which are located near the base of the ejaculatory ducts, secrete a thick yellow substance to nourish the sperm. This secretion forms 60% of the volume of the semen. Semen is the sperm-containing fluid that is ejaculated at the climax of male sexual excitement. From here, the semen travels into the 8-inch long urethra, which transports both urine and semen, but not at the same time. At first, the urethra is surrounded by the prostate gland, and then it is surrounded and protected externally by the penis that is relaxed except during sexual excitement. During sexual excitement, the penis stiffens and enlarges so it can deliver the sperm into the female vagina. During the expelling of the semen, which is known as ejaculation, the prostate gland secretes a thick alkaline fluid that increases the ability of the sperm to move in the semen. Located just below the prostate gland are the bulbourethral glands. These glands open into the urethra, and, during sexual arousal, they secrete the pre-ejaculate fluid that flushes out any residual urine from the urethra. It also lubricates the urethra to help the sperm pass through. When the male ejaculates into the vagina of the female, the sperm must travel upward through the uterus to fertilize the egg in the fallopian tube.
6. The reproductive system.
Now, the main function of the reproductive system is to produce offspring and perpetuate genes. You know what that means: making babies and handing down traits. But in order to do this, both males and females need certain organs. So before we go into the specifics of male and female anatomy, we'll give you a brief overview of the most important organs.
And now, the gonads, purveyors of life.
The gonads are the primary reproductive organs for both males and females. Male gonads are called testes. Female gonads are called ovaries. The gonads, or as they're referred to in junior high, the nads, are responsible for producing gametes and the sex hormones.
Gametes are, bluntly put, sex cells. The sex cells in males are sperm, and the sex cells in females are ova, or eggs. These two sex cells fuse together to form zygotes. These zygotes will then go on to mature into individual organisms who eat, drool, and enjoy annoying foam dinosaurs.
Sex hormones control the activity and maturation of the reproductive system, as well as a few other organs or tissues. We'll go into a more detailed description of them a little later.
There are also other reproductive organs we'll talk about in this section. Things like accessory glands and external genitalia. These organs have accessory functions that we'll go into in just a little bit.
Section A, male anatomy.
Male anatomy is divided up into the gonads, the male accessory duct system, and the accessory glands of reproduction. We'll start with the gonads.
The testes are the male gonads. They are the primary male sex organs. So, for those of you who thought the penis was a primary sex organ, sorry, you were wrong.
The testes are small, paired oval organs. They're found in the scrotum, a structure we'll fill you in on in just a minute.
The testes produce sperm, which we've already mentioned, and androgens, which are the male sex hormones. The most dominant male sex hormone is testosterone.
Testosterone.
Testosterone is the male hormone that's in charge of reproductive maturation, puberty, the male sex drive, or libido, and last but definitely not least, normal sperm production. Testosterone is even in charge of such Peter Brady-esque secondary reproductive characteristics as the deepening of the voice.
And now, the male duct system. Catch the wave.
The male duct system puts the duct in reproductive. They're what make easy, inexpensive sperm travel possible. The male duct system transports sperm from the testes to the outside world. All told, the duct system is made up of 4 parts: the epididymis, the vas deferens, the ejaculatory duct, and the urethra.
The epididymis is a coiled tube about 1.5 inches long and is found on the posterior surface of each testis. The epididymides receive immature sperm from the testes. The sperm mature and learn to swim as they wiggle through the epididymis for about 20 days.
After leaving the epididymis, the sperm enter the vas deferens, a tube that is about 18 inches long. The vas deferens, along with muscle, blood vessels, and nerves, makes up the spermatic cord. The vas deferens ends in an expanded section known as the ampulla. The ampulla forms part of the ejaculatory duct, the next duct in the duct system.
The ejaculatory duct is formed by the union of the ampullae and a duct from the seminal vesicle, which is a male accessory organ of the reproductive system. We'll give you the details on the seminal vesicle a little later on. Now, the ejaculatory duct passes through a structure called the prostate gland and eventually empties into the urethra.
Funnily enough, the urethra is a switch hitter. It carries both urine and semen and is a part of both the male urinary and reproductive systems. But sperm do always have the right of way over urine. Out of my way, buddy! I've got to be somewhere.
All right already. I'm moving. Jeez.
The urethra is the very end of the male duct system. It carries sperm to the tip of the penis and into the outside world.
Like the wheels and cogs of time itself, the male reproductive accessory glands grind on and on and on.
The male reproductive accessory glands have a messy but important job. The male accessory glands produce a fluid that helps transport the sperm. They also make nutrients and chemicals that nourish, protect, and help sperm move. All these fluids and nutrients, together with sperm, make semen.
Arr!
No, different kind of semen. This semen can also be called seminal fluid. It's a liquid that's 1% sperm and 99% accessory gland secretions. What are those? Glad you asked. The accessory glands are the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, and the bulbourethral glands.
The seminal vesicles are located posterior to or just behind the bladder. They produce a yellowish, thick fluid that's emptied into the ejaculatory duct.
This magical elixir contains all the nourishment for the sperm and chemicals that help it sneak into the ovum, which is something we'll talk about later.
The prostate gland is found just at the base of the bladder. It produces a milky fluid that's emptied into the urethra. This particular fluid plays a role in sperm mobility.
The bulbourethral glands, also known as the Cowper's glands, are just below the prostate. They produce a thick, clear mucus that drains into the urethra.
This mucus is released right before ejaculation to neutralize traces of acidic urine in the urethra and to provide lubrication. So the bulbourethral gland, the prostate gland, and the seminal vesicle all pitch in to produce semen. But neither the bulbourethral glands or any of this other stuff would have a purpose at all were it not for
male external genitalia. Catch the wave.
The external male genitalia consists of two structures, the penis and the scrotum. The penis is the male copulatory organ.
The penis is designed to deliver sperm into the female reproductive tract. It's made up of an attached root and a free shaft.
The majority of the penis is made up of erectile tissue, which is a spongy connective tissue.
This erectile tissue fills up with blood during an erection to allow the penis to effortlessly penetrate the vagina.
The scrotum is the final important part of the male external genitalia. The scrotum is a pouch of darkly pigmented skin suspended near the root of the penis, which houses the testes or testicles in two compartments. That's its job.
The scrotum tries to provide an optimal environment for sperm production. It tries to maintain a temperature that's 3 degrees lower than body temperature, so when it's cold, the scrotum can contract, moving the testes closer to the body to keep them warm. When it's hot, on the other hand, the scrotum can hang loose, away from the body, to decrease temperature. Also, inside the scrotum, the left testes hangs lower than the right one to reduce friction.
Now, the testes are the site of sperm production, okay? They are contained in the scrotal sac, which is outside the abdominal pelvic cavity. And the testes are surrounded by several layers of tissue. There is the tunica albuginea, the tunica vaginalis, and then there is a set of smooth muscles, the dartos and cremaster, and then finally there's the scrotal skin, and there's connective tissue between each. Okay. Inside the testes, seminiferous tubules conduct spermatogenesis continuously from puberty until death in the male. Okay. Interstitial cells, which are between the seminiferous tubules, secrete the testosterone, while the sustentacular cells secrete androgen-binding protein, and this is in response to testosterone, to keep the testosterone concentrated near the spermatogonia. In addition, the lower temperature of the scrotal sac is due to a couple of factors. Number one, it's outside the abdominal pelvic cavity. Number two, the dartos and cremaster muscles can raise or lower the scrotum depending on the outside temperature, so that when it's cold, the scrotum rises up, and when it's warm, the scrotum drops down. And then finally, the blood that supplies the testes is actually cooled because the testicular artery is surrounded by a pampiform plexus in the testicular vein that acts as a heat exchanger, so that the blood that gets there is 2 to 3 degrees cooler than cord blood. Okay?
In prophase 1, the DNA coils tightly and individual chromosomes become visible under the light microscope. Homologous chromosomes become closely associated in synapses, and they exchange segments by crossing over. By metaphase 1, the nuclear membrane has disappeared, and the microtubules form a spindle. Spindle fibers attach to only one side of each centromere, and the two homologous chromosomes attach to microtubules orienting from opposite poles. Each pair of homologs then lines up on the metaphase plate. Either maternal or paternal homolog may orient toward a given pole. In anaphase 1, the microtubules of the spindle fiber shorten and pull the chromosomes toward the poles, taking both sister chromatids with them.
Each pole ends up with a complete haploid set of chromosomes consisting of one member of the homologous pair. During telophase 1, the nuclear membrane reforms around the daughter nuclei. Each daughter nucleus contains two sister chromatids for each chromosome attached to a common centromere. Because of crossing over, the two sister chromatids are not identical. During prophase 2, the nuclear envelope breaks down and a new spindle forms. In metaphase 2, spindle fibers bind to both sides of the centromeres. During anaphase 2, the spindle fibers contract and the sister chromatids move toward opposite poles. In telophase 2, nuclear envelopes reform around the sets of daughter chromosomes.
Spermatogonia are the cells from which sperm cells arise. The spermatogonia divide by mitosis. One daughter cell remains a spermatogonium, and the other becomes a primary spermatocyte. The primary spermatocyte divides by meiosis to form secondary spermatocytes. Secondary spermatocytes divide again to form spermatids. The spermatids differentiate into sperm cells.
Spermatogenesis takes place in the seminiferous tubules of the testi. The spermatogonia mature into spermatocytes. Meiosis cuts in half the number of chromosomes inside the cell from 46, which is the typical diploid number, to 23, which is the haploid number. And of course, as we just saw, recombination creates novel combinations of genes in 50% of that genetic material, so that every sperm cell is genetically different from the male that produced it. Okay? The sperm is a motile gamete. You can see here the parts of the sperm made up of the head, the midpiece, and the tail. The head contains a genetic material. The acrosome surrounding the tip of the head contains enzymes that digest the corona radiata and zona pellucida, so that one lucky sperm cell can manage to make it to the sperm cell receptors, which are on the surface of the egg, okay, and affect fertilization. Of course, the tail is there for propulsion. The body basically is made up of mitochondria that utilize ATP to power the tail, which is made up of microtubules. Okay, so basically, at the end of the day, right, the sperm makes the trip described here. Right, they're produced in the seminiferous tubules. They move from the seminiferous tubules to the tubulus rectus, to the rete testis, to the efferent ductules, to the epididymis, where they learn how to swim, okay, become motile. And then from the epididymis into the vas deferens, to the ejaculatory duct, into the prostatic urethra, which is right here, okay, it's prostatic urethra. Then to the membranous urethra, and then finally to the penile urethra, which is inside the penis. Okay, so the male urethra actually has three parts. You can see those parts more clearly here. Okay, because of this, men get fewer UTIs than women because the urethra is longer and further from the anus. Okay, and note that in men the urethra is the terminal organ of both reproduction and the urinary system. Okay, the penis is surrounded on the inside around the urethra by vascular tissue, the corpora spongiosum surrounding the urethra itself, and the corpora cavernosa on the dorsal side of the penis. Those are two columns of erectile tissue. And when an erection is achieved, basically the blood flow into those vascular spaces is greater than the blood flow out, and we achieve an erection. Okay, the bulbospongiosus and ischiocavernosus muscles also help to restrict the flow of blood out, while the parasympathetic nervous system actually is responsible for the vasodilation that fills the vascular spaces and achieves the erection. It's one of the few times where the parasympathetic nervous system has a role in blood pressure. Okay, the accessory organs you can see are the prostate gland, the bulbourethral gland, which is right there. Okay, there's the prostate, and the seminal vesicle. Okay, up here, as well as of course the testes contribute as well. And so those all bring in components of semen that are designed to buffer the pH closer to neutral, so that the sperm have an easier time swimming from the tip of the penis to the egg, which is a long trip for such a tiny cell, and also provide a fuel source so that the mitochondria, the midpiece, can power the flagella and the sperm can swim to their final destination. Okay, and again, you can see how the testes are actually outside the abdominal pelvic cavity. They actually descend from inside the abdominal pelvic cavity during development through an opening called the inguinal canal, guided by a tendon called the gubernaculum, into the scrotal sac. Okay, if they fail to descend, that's a condition called cryptorchidism, and generally what we have to do is go and rescue that testy and get it down into the scrotal sac so that it can function normally. Okay, the seminal vesicles make up 60% of the semen volume, the prostate gland around the upper urethra, another 25% or so, of course, testes providing another 3 to 5%, and the bulbourethral glands the remainder. Okay, the secretions mix with sperm, and that was what forms the semen. Okay, the scrotum contains the testes, which are the site of spermatogenesis, and the penis is the organ of intercourse. The shaft contains the erectile tissue, as does the glans penis, which is the tip of the penis furthest from the body. The urinary meatus is in the center of the glans, and the prepuce or foreskin covers the glans and is sometimes removed in a process known as circumcision for hygienic reasons or for religious reasons, sometimes both. In an erection, blood engorges the erectile tissue. This, of course, is facilitated by parasympathetic input. Emission is a sympathetic process, which is the movement of the semen from the genital ducts into the proximal urethra, and ejaculation is the expulsion of the semen from the urethra. Okay, so both of those are sympathetic responses. Orgasm is the sensation at the height of sexual stimulation, and sexual response, of course, is under autonomic control, involving both parasympathetic and sympathetic responses. Okay, keep in mind that it's possible to have an orgasm without ejaculation, and it's possible to have ejaculation without orgasm. The two are not necessarily linked. Okay, testosterone is known probably better to you guys as a performance-enhancing drug, a PED. Okay, what does it do? Well, many things, right? It increases your hematocrit, it increases your bone density, it increases your muscle mass, it promotes growth of axillary and body hair in the typical male pattern, right? And it enhances libido, which is sex drive. Okay, so because of all of that, it sometimes is abused as a PED, and the result is to make you bigger, stronger, faster. But of course, when you take large amounts of it, you cut into the communication between the testes and the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, and as we'll see in just a minute, that can have negative consequences. Okay, so that's one of two sources of testosterone in the male. The other, of course, being the adrenal cortex. Okay, the control of testosterone production is triggered when testosterone levels in the blood fall. The hypothalamus releases gonadotropin-releasing hormone, GnRH, all right, and that hits the anterior pituitary, moving through the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system, which is that collection of two capillary beds joined by a portal vessel. Okay, and then the anterior pituitary produces luteinizing hormone, which produces testosterone, which induces a testosterone production in the testes of the male. And also follicle-stimulating hormone, which in the male promotes the production of androgen-binding protein so that testosterone can stay concentrated near the spermatogonia, which are what ultimately produce the sperm cells. And then what happens as testosterone levels build up is that they cut off production of gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, and FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary. Okay, now when an athlete takes a PED that is testosterone based, what happens is that he actually cuts into this line of communication between the testes and the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary. Okay, and the result of that is that the negative feedback mechanism is messed up, right? Because normally, you know, this is an inhibitory response, right? This is inhibitory. Well, if you're taking a PED through a needle, okay, what's going to happen is that you're telling the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus, right? This is PED, okay, some sort of testosterone analog, right? That you don't need any gonadotropin releasing hormone produced by the hypothalamus and any luteinizing hormone produced by the anterior pituitary, and so your testosterone production falls off. The result of that is that the testes aren't stimulated to do anything, and they can atrophy, okay, which means that they can basically shrink away to nothing, right? And then when you go off the PED, you have no natural source of testosterone, and you'll actually begin to develop female secondary sex characteristics such as breast growth, loss of crit, loss of bone density, loss of muscle mass, redistribution of fat, okay, loss of hair, all right, all of that because you don't have a significant amount of normal testosterone production other than your adrenal cortex, which, as I stated before, doesn't produce very much, okay.